Hello and welcome everybody for joining us at this breakout session with Continental Europe. We have with us today Antonio Cucco Fiore, if I'm saying it correctly, who is Sales Manager Digital and Mobility Services at Continental. And we have also Timo Ketterer, who is Head of Product Management also at Continental. Welcome guys, welcome.
Hello.
So in this session, we will talk a little bit more about how connectivity and tachographs in, let's say, the wider fleet and mobility world, talking a little bit more around trucks and buses, how smart tachographs can effectively help us and benefit their fleet and operating costs in the future. So I'm more than happy to hand over to Timo and Antonio, but first to the audience. If you have any questions for them, please put your questions in the chat. And at the end of the presentation of Continental, I will return and I will moderate any questions that there might be with Timo and Antonio, and we will try to answer as much as possible of them. All right. So Timo, Antonio, the floor is yours, and we will meet up again in 30 minutes.
Perfect. So thank you very much, Sven, for the introduction, and also from my side, a warm welcome to the entire audience. So I hope you enjoyed lunch and the networking session, and you're now ready to deep dive a little bit with us into tachograph compliance services and the open platform we have created around that. So we will focus in the next minutes a little bit on what data tachographs are actually providing in the past and what is coming up in the future. So how are they further developing? And next to that, also like what analysis can be made up on this data and how other partners, for example, FMS providers, can benefit from the analysis we're doing on the base of the tachograph data. So let's deep dive into the topic, and we'll start with a little bit of look on the past, like where we actually coming from with the tachographs. So we do have the digital tachographs basically since the year 2006, and they have slightly developed over the last couple of years in terms of security, but the data they were recording was actually always the same. So their main purpose was to record driving times and the vehicle speed allocated to the driver who's currently sitting on the vehicle and moving the vehicle. And this data was recorded in a tachograph. The different solutions exist today in the market to make a remote download, how it is called, to access the tachograph data, in order to get the data out from the tachographs and to make analysis on the base of this data. And this is actually quite the same since the year 2006. And just in 2018, we had the first evolution concerning also the data which the tachographs are recording. And we were coming here to the Smart Tachographs version 1, where already a couple of additional data was added to the tachographs and what they are recording, and where then later other system can make use for added value services, where we will discuss later a little bit more about. So with the Smart Tachograph version 1, we call it on our side the DTCO 4.0, a couple of new functionalities were added. The first one was DSRC, so you can see the small antenna on the upper left side. And this technology was actually intended to make remote control of the vehicles. If control authorities want to check if any vehicle is worth stopping on the highway, and to make a more detailed investigation. So you could make a communication over 20 meters, check some data, and then in case there's an indication for some infringements or manipulations, then the vehicle was stopped and further controlled. Next to that, GPS technologies was integrated into the tachographs. So every tachograph since the year 2019 has actually a GPS receiver inside, which is working with all the common positioning technologies like Galileo, GLONASS, Baidu, or GPS. And next to that, also data protection measures were implemented so that the drivers are getting back more control about what data is leaving the tachograph, what data is recorded. So in the end, when drivers are inserting their driver card, they're asked, are you willing to share your personal data? So in the end, telematic devices or FMS systems can access this data and check if the driver has agreed to share his personal data or not. And now there's a lot of things upcoming still in the future. So we see here 2019 to 2023, And in the year 2023, also driven by the mobility package that the one or the other of you probably already heard, also the tachographs will be updated again. And there's again a lot of additional data that is recorded in the tachograph, which is from our perspective very valuable for added services that we can build up based on the tachograph data. So what is coming into the future tachographs? We talked already about GPS information that was, or GPS systems and technology that was integrated into the tachograph since 2019. And now there will be a next evolution. So the position information that are recorded in the tachograph are not only like standard position information, they are now trusted position information. So the tachographs coming in 2023 are basically one of the first use cases which make use of the secured GPS signal from the Galileo positioning system, so the European positioning system. There's the signature attached, and by means of that, we can validate that it is a real GPS position and it was not somehow manipulated. Next to that, the tachographs are getting a little bit more smarter than what we are having today. So map information, for example, map data is now implemented in the tachographs. So we are not just recording GPS information, we will also detect with the Smart Tachograph version 2 in 2023 border crossing. And that goes one by one with the mobility package, because the tachograph should be a base in the future to enforce also cabotage transports and posting of worker rules in the European transportation market. So in order to fully enforce these future rules, a next, I would say, feature set is added to the tachograph. And that means that drivers who are using the tachograph with their driver card are requested in the future to enter into the tachograph the moment when they are loading or unloading the vehicle. So, and I think that is, we call it kind of the tachograph becomes a trusted data center for many use cases, like, for example, freight forwarding system. Since we're getting driver ID, license plate, position of the vehicle, border crossings, and loading and unloading event, all this recorded in the tachograph. We can take it out via remote download, make analysis based on that data, and share it with other systems. So that is basically what is happening around the tachograph. But yeah, like, how does this really relate to added value services, and what can we do out of this data for services? So we have created over the last couple of years tachograph data analysis system, which is defined, like our title of the presentation, with an open platform approach. So we have APIs in place to not only make the analysis for our fleet customers, but also to share that data with other systems like FMS systems or some other use cases I'm going to show you now on the next slide. So the first point we see is also related to the mobility package, payroll systems. So in the future, it is getting more and more important to understand when drivers are working abroad in another countries and to ensure that they're paid according to the minimum wages rules of these different countries where the drivers are moving through when they're going on a transport with their vehicle. So in the past, the tachographs were already recording driving time, working time. So based on APIs, these systems can be used and to make, in a quite simple manner, payroll calculations or to use that data for payroll systems. And having always, based on the tachograph data, also a complete list of drivers who are currently active in the fleet, this data can be also used in order to make a more efficient posting of worker certificate declaration in the future. And then starting with 2023, with the Smart Tachograph version 2 we were showing you before, the tachograph enables a detailed information about crossing, about border crossing, and about optimizing the calculation of minimum wages, since we have, as mentioned before, border crossing inside the data from the tachograph, which is then downloaded on the periodic or frequencies that are defined by the fleet. And we are getting also the loading and unloading information. Another use case we are seeing is something called fleet performance monitoring. So we just recently launched a couple of days ago a new feature in our tachograph analysis service, which is creating for the fleet a very simple score concerning their fleet performance related to the infringements they're having in all their tachograph data. So, and in this score, we not only take the simple quantity of infringements which are occurring, we are calculating the score based on the severity of these different infringements. Because in the end, the difference if a fleet is, or if a driver is doing 1 hour of more driving time during a day or 5 hours. So that is weight in that score, and also the amount of drivers the fleet has, and providing to the fleet a key performance indicator to measure how many infringements exist in the tachograph, respectively in the fleet. And we see that this data can also be shared with, for example, insurance companies in order to make a better premiums for the fleet, because they get a better understanding based on that infringement score. What is the profile of that fleet? So are they tending to exceed the driving time very often, which is for sure then a risk also for that vehicle that there's a higher probability for an accident. And all this data can be taken out via APIs from that open platform. And then last but not least, also the fleets can make use of this information in order to understand where they are, what is the financial risk and the risk in general, because if there are too many infringements in the data, a fleet could potentially lose their transportation license. And then we're coming here also to another use case, which is EATS tolling. But here I would like to hand over to my colleague Antonio, who will provide you there a little bit more insights.
Thank you, Timo, and thank you, Sven, and very warm welcome from my side as well. My name is Antonio Cucco Fiore, responsible for sales and business development of digital and mobility services for Continental in Europe. So as Timo just mentioned, of course, the service which we can provide and all the data which could be enhanced thanks to our intelligence, and that is one of the case of the EATS tolling service. As you might know, that the European Electronic Tolling Service, EATS, ensures interoperability of the tolling service across the entire European Union road networks. So EATS enables road users to easily pay tolls and throughout the whole EU with only one subscription contract with the one service provider and a single onboard unit. So is by limiting cash transaction and tolling stations. So it's also eliminating some cumbersome procedures for occasional users. So it's facilitate daily operation for road user and improves traffic flow and reduce congestion. So that is important because we will go into details afterwards, but then I will jump, please, Timo, if you can jump to the other slide. Thank you. So how we make the use of the tachograph data. So we can enable, enhance the data through an enabler, which is could be an existing in-vehicle device, could be an OEM as well as an aftermarket device box. And in case the device is not there, which we are going to also to deploy soon, also an important tools which will be plug and play, easy and quick into use, and will be enabling a lot of new value for the customer and for the fleets, and which will go from FMS system to taco analysis, which we have already, and we can also provide it in a different format what we have been doing today. So if with your permission, we can go to the next slide, Timo. So it's exactly this, what we do. We can retrieve data, which will be pushed through APIs with the approach of microservices, as well as the holistic way. So the entire data will flow into our tachograph analysis system. So through our intelligence, we can make value in terms of processing the data, analyze the data, making report, and sending back to third-party cloud. In this case, could be your clouds for an FMS providers, and that you will enhance your services through giving more value-added service. In this case, will be compliance services, which you will show to giving value to your customers and to your fleet. So that is an important thing because it can be used from many providers in many use cases, as Timo mentioned before. Could be payroll, can be insurance, and many other use cases, which we'll see also in the next slides. So jumping into the next slide, what we can give to you, it's a solution which is as it is today, potentially, through retrieving data from your cloud, processing it and sending back to you as we saw before. But also we can provide our compliance service platform in a new manner. So it's a white label solution, completely white label, looking and feel exactly the way your platform is, and will be a very valuable data transferring, data ping pong in between your cloud and our cloud. So then I will pass the ball again to Timo, which will explain also a couple of very new and killing application, we might say, about what Continental is planning to release as an upcoming services.
So next to that white label solution Antonio was just explaining, that all can also work purely based on APIs. So coming again to that open platform. So in the end, like tachograph download files are transferred to a tachograph data analysis system. This analysis are done on an infringement score for the fleet or concerning minimum wages calculation, and are then just transferred back via APIs to the fleet, to FMS system, so that they can then be further processed or shown to the driver if there's no white label solution requested, for example. So there are many different ways how this can work. And the solution is basically built up in an open way to support different approaches. And what is else upcoming in 2022 in order to more simplify the way to get data from the tachograph and to make analysis on that base? So that looks a little bit more complex, but we just touched that diagram slightly. In the end, we talked a lot about this data from the tachograph and how to make analysis on the data which is coming out from the tachograph. But there's still the challenge. You also always need to get the data out from the tachograph. And in the end, there are frequently updates. We went to the Smart Tachograph version 1. We are now moving in 2023 to Smart Tachographs version 2. And always there are some changes in the protocols. So this stuff needs to be updated. But in the end, it's always the same to make that download from the tachograph. And that we saw also in the market. And we said, hey, it makes actually no sense that everyone is developing the same again. And I think every company is fighting with good resources for developing services and software. So we were coming up with a remote download as a service concept to make this whole services around tachograph more complete. And in the end, we can enhance this tachograph data analysis also with a remote download as a service approach, where we are interacting with FMS companies, and they basically can make use of our complete backend and front end for remote download. So we are taking care about new tachograph revisions, any updates that needs to be done. And in case the partner wants, there could be also a piece of source code provided that could be integrated into the telematic hardware, which is then managing the whole communication with the tachograph. But it's optional. It is basically designed as a cloud-to-cloud solution. So where everything what you need to do around remote download is then coming from our backend to a partner backend. And by means of that, it is in the end a quite holistic solution around making the access to tachograph more and more easy, and to get the value also from the tachograph data in a super easy way. And then going a little bit away from the tachograph itself, so we see already the tachograph is a system which is ensuring safety in the European transportation business. But we saw also that vehicle inspection, and especially verified vehicle inspection, is an important aspect. So we're bringing also in 2022 a solution for a verified vehicle inspection, where we can guarantee that the driver is really walking around the vehicle, doing the inspection of the vehicle, and guarantees by means of that a safe vehicle, a vehicle which is safe to drive. And they're for sure customizable workflows, so that in case for specific vehicles, different checks are required, that can be supported. And in the end, also other stakeholders must be there involved, according to our opinion, like, for example, the mechanics in the workshop, that they are getting digitally the open defects directly from the driver, can investigate the open defects and prioritize the work that needs to be done, and then also send back a notification as soon as a defect is repaired on the vehicle. Also, that system is built up in an open manner, so strong APIs are in place that it can be connected to FMS systems, any other telematic provider in the market, in order to provide then a holistic solution to the customer. And in order to avoid that, the customer needs to interact with 100 different companies for every individual use case or every individual service. So I hand over again to Antonio to talk a little bit more about tolling possibilities.
Yeah, thank you, Timo, again. And let's talk about tolling, as we mentioned before, going a little bit into details. So thanks to its DSRC interface, the Smart Tachograph could also be the key to harmonize European toll collection in the future. It can calculate the road and the charges incurred and send them to the tool charging location in its standard, so the European electronic toll system. And this means that the fleet managers would no longer have to invest in a large number of different toolboxes and devices. As you see today, probably in each European truck, you will see several boxes which are located in the truck. And it's perfectly possible to think that the Smart Tachograph can do this work. So that is an enabler, which is also important and useful for the European transportation. Then jumping into the other slide, Timo, if we see it also looking forward in the future, so we see also the tolling as a potential enabler itself, from which will be enabled in terms of tolling service from the tachograph. So the tachograph will be the key also for the future, and we expect that will be the tool, the onboard unit itself, which will allow also to pay the tolling on the European roads. So jumping to the next slide, we can see that we have a high level of evaluation based on its concept. So first, taking a look at the capabilities of the DTCO, it is a secure speed source using 3 different sensors, so KETAs, GNSS. So the DCRC antenna able to fulfill the 5.8 gigahertz, and is homologated highly secured product for anti-tampering technologies, GLONASS, for the GLONASS. And with the DTCO 4.1, and the DTCO can be connected to the cloud with a connectivity device from the market using the TCU, the telematics control unit that is already present in the heavy vehicles. So that reaches a needs dedicated proxy services, and we have a needs front-end service, and that is front-end is responsible also for the management of the DCRC profile in the DTCO. So from the tolling proxy, the data can be then shared with its providers' backends and to the NTP back offices. So the tool declaration can be then obtained from the proxy and be processed to the TSP that then be shared to the tolling charges and with the customer, with the user portal, which is in use with the customer. So I think it's a very strong added value, which we can provide thanks to the tachograph data. And then I will say, if we jump to the next slide, Timo, I will share also my contact details. As you can see, you can reach me out also on LinkedIn, and we will be happy to answer to your question as well.
Thank you very much, Timo. Thank you very much, Antonio. I think it was a very interesting presentation. I got to be honest, for me, this is a little bit a side of let's say the fleet world, which I'm not that familiar with. So it was very interesting to see the evolution that's also happening from that perspective. I got a couple of questions myself, which I would love to ask you. But before I do that, I just want to talk to the audience again. If you have any questions, just put them in the chat, and we will try to answer them. But if I may, just going back, because you talked a little bit about the possibility with the Smart Tachograph to look at driver scores and just effectively score the way a driver is driving its truck. How far does that go? I mean, in the sense that talking about driver behavior, how far does that go? Is that really looking at, okay, is he speeding? Does that go as far as, let's say, general connectivity solutions on a passenger car, or is that more limited? Perhaps Timo, yes.
Yeah, it's a good question, Sven. Thank you. So I think it's complementary also to other solutions which are existing today in the market. And I think we heard already today a little bit about how we can achieve cost savings in a fleet, and efficiency also in terms of fuel consumption is for sure still a key topic for fleets. And that is one score to rate drivers respectively, to rate the performance of a fleet. And we see next to that also the scores based on infringements, and that can include, like you were mentioning, for example, overspeeding, but that includes also like if the drivers are exceeding the driving times, the driver hours rules which are in place across Europe, but also working time regulations. And a very specific thing in Europe is we have a couple of countries, a couple of different working time regulation, and they're not all the same, which makes it complex. And for sure, sometimes also difficult for the driver to understand them, but we're taking them into consideration, including the severity of these infringements. Like I said, it's different if you exceed it by 1 hour or by 2 or 3 hours, and then generating that score. So we see that this score for infringements is then in the end complementing to an overall score, which also includes, for example, fuel efficient driving, that then can be merged in an FMS system.
Okay, and is that because I forgot now, is that something that is already available today? And if so, are companies already using that, and how are they using that? Are they I don't know, making a little bit of a gamification perhaps around that internally between their drivers, making sure that the highest scores are being promoted, so to speak?
So the entire fleet score for the fleet, including all the different drivers, is available just a few days now, and by end of this year, it will be then broken down to the individual fleet level, to the individual driver level, so that the fleet is seeing the score for each and every driver. And then things like gamification and so on, like you were just mentioning, will then follow that individual driver scores by end of this year.
All right, super. Another question I have is talking about the connectivity effectively of the tachograph to the cloud, so to speak. I can imagine that on rounds across Europe, there are certain locations where obviously connectivity is not as easy to manage than in other areas of Europe. How do you fulfill that? So if there's a connection loss, would that be stored temporarily on the tachograph itself? How does that work when connection is not available?
Yeah. So these use cases we were sharing with the tachograph data analysis are basing on taking the download via this remote download of a specific thing in the tachograph word to get out the data. And this download is actually just happening place depending on the configuration of the fleet, but I would say like usually once per week if you have a telematic in the vehicle, or you trigger it down to even every day. So the data is stored in the tachograph, on which base we are calculating this infringement score. And if there's no connectivity, then as soon as the vehicle is getting active again or getting online again, then the download of these files is triggered, so that then at least once per day, actual data is available in the system, and the scores can be then accordingly calculated.
Okay, thank you, Timo. And Antonio, one more question for you, because I know that we are running a little bit out of time, but when do you expect we're going to be there, when there is a unified, let's say, tolling system that works today? Because indeed, right now the tachograph can effectively step in and act as the intermediary there. But do you think that there is across entire Europe one unified tolling provider, or at least one unified tolling system that we can expect to come?
Yes, thanks for the question, Sven. Yeah, it's an ongoing process. If we see nowadays a country like Poland, they have already started with such a legislation, and we see that is going more and more in this direction. So the entire Europe will be unified. It's hard to make a correct forecast, but as I said, it's an ongoing process. We expect that in a couple, 2-3 years, we believe that the unification could be achieved, at least as a principle of the tolling roads. Yeah,
I can imagine that from a European Union perspective. Of course, this is something that well takes quite a bit of time, but also that it is something that will be encouraged by all the member states, and that this is something that should effectively help us and within the transportation industry. Move more quickly, efficiently across the different countries. So let's hope it goes rather quickly. Timo, Antonio, I need to thank you. Thank you very much for your interesting presentation. I hope the audience enjoyed it. There weren't many questions, so that means that you explained it very well. I hope you enjoyed the rest of the conference. To the audience, you can now go back to sessions and effectively select your next session of this afternoon, which is available right now. All right. Thank you very much, guys. Thank you. We'll speak soon. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.